Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Carol Eierman, the town planner in Gorham. And I'm going to kind of look back and forth because the camera is to the right of me and folks are here in the fire station in person to the left of me. So I'll just kind of weave my head back and forth. This is our second in-person public meeting for the master planning process for Little Falls and South Windham in both Gorham and Windham. Amanda and I are here in person to welcome everyone and give you sort of the background of where we've been and what we perceive as next steps in our process so far. So we've been at least a year and a half to 2 years talking about this, getting organized to do this master planning process, both Gorham and Windham. And we applied for a grant, got the grant. That took a little while. And then we hired consultants to help us with the master planning process to get feedback as to what the towns want to see in this village area, this combined village. So what we have done is we've held one public meeting already to get feedback, and then we held some food truck events, which turned out to be better than expected, and we got some feedback during those events. And this is our second in-person and Zoom public meeting. And we're going to get a little story as to what we found out so far, what the public would like to see for this area. And our consultants, North Star Planning and Aceto, will describe those things shortly. And then let me have Amanda say a little bit about what's going on sort of in her mind and where Windham is at.
Thanks. I have to kind of move somewhere in the room where people can see me. I just want to say thanks everyone for being here. This is Gorham and Windham working together. I think there's been some misunderstanding kind of over the course of the summer that there's a developer proposing something for this part of Windham and Gorham. And this is the town's plan to understand what people want to see happen in the future here in the South Windham and Little Falls villages. We both worked together previously in 1998 for a master plan for this area. A lot has changed since then. We've both written a comprehensive plan and that asked us to update our master plans for this area. So that's why we're here. So thanks for being here. Want to turn it back over to you guys.
Yeah, Ben, I guess I can kick us off. This is Nick Aceto with Aceto Landscape Architects. Glad to be here with everyone tonight. As Carol mentioned, we have a slide presentation that we put together with a number of slides that we'll move through fairly quickly. But just to give a little intro, I'm Nick Aceto, Aceto Landscape Architects. We're based in Portland. I grew up in Portland and very familiar with the Windham area and the Villages area. So proud to work on this project and be joined by North Star. Ben, if you want to introduce yourself and your team and maybe jump into your presentation.
Sure thing. Ben Smith from North Star Planning, and you'll see Logan Capone on from North Star as well. And I was a planner in the town of Windham for a long time, and continued to work with the town and with Gorham as well over the last few years on a number of projects. And this is really a project that, again, has been in the works for a long time, kind of echoing what Amanda had said. So I think tonight we're going to want to share a little bit about what we've heard from the communities over the last several months and talk a little bit about some of the preliminary recommendations and share some graphics that Nick and his team have developed to help illustrate how those recommendations might form and shape future development in the area. So with that said, we're going to bring up the slides. Thank you, Nick. And I think what we can do is walk through those. And for the folks who are joining us online, Logan has just put a note in the chat. So if you have questions as we go down through, go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. We'll be taking questions a little later on in the session. There's a microphone that's working very well for the folks who are all together in a room. And for the folks who are online, we'll be taking questions via chat. So Nick, these slides are on your machine. So if you could go through, and this is the project team. You've already heard from Carol and Amanda and a little bit from Nick and myself. And the study area we're talking about is very similar to the 1998 plan. It covers the growth areas in both communities of Windham and Gorham. It's characterized really by Route 202, Gray Road, and in both communities, and the Presumpscot River. So it's approximately about a square mile. So this is a little bit about the timeline that we talked about. We can refer back to this later in the presentation. But we've been working on this project since February, and we are at the point where we're developing recommendations and an implementation plan. So we want to share those with you at this stage as we work toward finalizing this plan for the February timeframe. So a little bit about where we've been. There is a project website that's been up since the beginning of the project, villagesmasterplan.com. And after some background work and getting the website set up and reviewing past planning efforts, we had a public meeting at the Little Falls Activity Center in Gorham back in May. And as Carol had mentioned, we followed that up with some weekly presence at food truck events on the Gorham side over at the rec center. And those were really interesting to see how those developed. People had a chance to stop by and see drawings as concepts progressed. And it was a great way to get in front of people and really expand the reach of the public participation work in a way that was going to where people were going to be in the community. So we heard a number of things at those meetings, as well as through the online survey and the website. And it was striking the degree to which the original vision statement from the 1998 plan has really held true. I think there's really some broad agreement that that's still a relevant vision for the area. And as you read through some of these quotes, there's some common themes that developed, and we grouped those into three concepts, three objectives for our planning work that guided the rest of the work. And it had to do with creating a vibrant community center, connecting the villages, and preserving rural character. And we'll talk about what each of those mean as we go through this work. But really, the idea of creating a place that people want to be while protecting the unique assets in the study area were a couple of those guiding principles. So you'll see everybody's familiar with the study area today. A lot of these Main Street views, a lot of these river views, and taking that vision of a vibrant downtown, protecting the rural resources and connecting the city, the villages, fall into the couple of concepts. And I'm keeping an eye on the other screen while people continue to join us in progress. One of the concepts that helped shape how we looked at those objectives was the 15-minute community. And essentially what that means is being able to meet a lot of your daily needs within a walkable area. So creating the kind of place where people can live, shop, recreate, and have those places that you can hang out with that's not at home and not at work are all part of the 15-minute community. So that concept is important to the recommendations that'll follow. And I think one of those things has to do with housing for all types, for all kinds of people. The next slide talks about the missing middle of housing. And that essentially, if you haven't heard of that concept,
No.
you may know from your own experience that there's a lot of really high-end housing projects happening, and there's a lot of state projects that are, going toward incentives and subsidized housing, affordable housing, low-income housing, and I think there's a lot, as this diagram illustrates, a lot of different ways you can build housing in between those. So what we are hoping to see happen in this area, based on, again, public comment, but also some of the placemaking principles in that 15-minute neighborhood, is to have a wide range of housing available so that people have housing choices within the study area. So all of these things kind of build toward this vision statement. And we didn't want to spend a lot of time, again, trying to make fine-tuning adjustments to the 1998 vision statement, but we wanted to break this idea of a vibrant mixed-use New England village, which means a lot of things to a lot of people, into 5 themes. And those themes are represented by the icons around the edges, where housing, like we just talked about, but also building a local business ecosystem. So a lot of this work, when we think about downtowns, is about commerce and a place to work and a place to shop. It's also about, in this study area in particular, connectivity and mobility. And it's also about outdoor recreation, more so than many other places we've looked at, having the river and the amazing trail system, including the Mountain Division Trail, which is kind of the crown jewel of the area, as a centerpiece for future development of the area. And finally, building community. And this is something that really comes from the community, more so than town hall. So we'll give you a sense of each of these in a moment, give you a little more detail, but these are the 5 themes that we're going to organize our recommendations around, and some of the findings that we'll be presenting in the final plan document. But to give you a little bit of a preview of what those are at a policy level, we'll kind of move into a little bit more detail as we go through the session. What you're going to see over the next 5 slides are the strategies, the policies that go toward these, as well as a little bit of a statement about it. It's framed as a vision. Outdoor recreation, we want to improve public access to the river for leisure and recreation, and to create a network of open spaces. So strategy 1, 2, 3, and 4 for each of those. For local business ecosystem, we want to create a place where local business can thrive, reshape the streetscape for small businesses, and create a local business stakeholder network. So that is not a zoning recommendation. It's not a building design standard recommendation, but there's going to be a number of recommendations as we go forward that have to do with how the community organizes itself, knowing that it's not going to be up to the town office in each community to make all of these things happen. It's going to rely on outside partners, members of the community themselves, people who live and work within the study area. Next slide, please. Housing, as we mentioned earlier, we want to increase residential development opportunities for folks. We also want to respect the existing character of neighborhoods today. So we will be recommending more density, more people along the Main Street corridor to increase activity and the gravity and to support local business. But there's a lot of existing neighborhoods around the outskirts that we don't want to see change as much. And there you can have a much lighter touch and meet some of those community goals in a way that respects those neighborhoods' existing character. Connectivity and mobility is really a lot of what we heard about speed and safety when it comes to walking. Vehicle speeds in the area are high. We want to make sure that people feel safe and encourage people to walk or bike, and think about development that will help get this area ready for transit, for fixed route bus service. And finally, I had hinted at this a little bit, but this is really going back to the things we heard about having pride, being proud to have your business in South Windham or Little Falls, being proud to live in the area, and thinking about how to respect the history, not only the history of the built environment, but also social. There used to be parades in this area. This is a place where a lot of activity and a lot of history in the communities was centered, and we want to make sure that we can recapture some of that energy and focus that toward the future. So with that said, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to jump back into this in a bit more detail, answer some questions as we go. But the next bunch of slides that Nick is going to walk through are going to show how some of these things might play out on the ground as we think about the future of the villages. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Nick. Thanks.
so thank you. Thanks, Ben. So as Ben mentioned, the next few slides, or next dozen or so slides, we'll try to move through pretty quickly, but what we're trying to show here is how do some of these bigger planning ideas start to meet the ground, and testing those ideas through design scenarios, actually sketching the ideas out over photographs, or kind of identifying some of these key sites that we identified through the process, both through this public meeting that we had at the Activity Center earlier in the year in May, and then also through the Summer Thursday events, which we attended through July and August. So through those Summer Thursday events, we kind of worked this, what I call it, an iterative process, where every week we brought back a new sketch or a map or something, and solicited feedback from the public, maybe from some of you. And so some of what I'm going to show you is the result of that collaborative process and that input process. So before we dive into individual sites and scenarios, just zooming back out to the overall study area again, and looking at some of the key assets in the area, and sort of how the village area is shaped by the broader landscape and by the infrastructure that's in place, and generally the character of the place. So what this map is showing is, again, the overall study area. Route 202 is the defining spine, the thoroughfare running right down the center, north-south. And obviously the Presumpscot River bisects Gorham to the southwest and Windham to the northeast. The green areas that are shown on this map are some of the larger undeveloped parcels in the study area, just so we can start to understand the character of the area. It's quite rural. It is generally quite undeveloped, and the village core itself is quite small. It's really toward the center of the site, or toward the center of the study area, around that Ketty Mill label, along the 202 corridor. So this series of maps is really just trying to identify and set a framework for the village and what defines it. So this is an overlay showing walking sheds. So the dashed circles are 5-minute or quarter-mile concentric walking sheds centered on the Presumpscot River as it crosses under 202, kind of identifying that area as village core. And then radiating out from that, the walking sheds are reconciled to the road corridors. So we can get a better understanding kind of scale, and the idea, the notion behind the 5-minute walk is that 5 minutes is typically understood in the planning world as the maximum distance generally that people will walk to, say, catch a bus or visit a local park or walk to school, or walk to get groceries. Walking, leaving their home without their car, going somewhere, traveling without their car. And this is important because it affects kind of the way that the village is shaped, housing opportunities, development opportunities, both in terms of housing, commercial development, but also parks and open space. This is kind of how we're thinking about shaping the village around this idea of walking. So this is a view of the current zoning. So this map has taken into consideration both sides of the river, the Gorham side and the Windham side, and starting to color code each of the zoning districts on each side that are comparable in terms of what they allow for various uses and densities of development, and trying to find some pattern. And then this is a high-level concept plan. The idea is compositing or combining all of those notions about walking, concentrating future development and housing within a walkable distance to Main Street, and thinking about really the goal of this project, as we see it, is creating a more vibrant village center. And all the things, through all the feedback that we heard through the Summer Thursday events, really what the public wants here, what everyone wants, is a vibrant village center. We want the market on Main Street that you can walk to, or the cool coffee shop or restaurant. And so this plan is really thinking about what are the ingredients that we have to work with here, and how can we enable those things through changes in local land use, the zoning ordinance, and also just physical design, thinking about what the opportunities might be, where trail corridors could happen, where we could start to create an open space and trail framework, but also adjusting that land use pattern to create some housing opportunities, and really recognizing that what's going to make a vibrant village center viable are people, and people within close proximity. And then on the same token, or kind of actually on the flip side of the coin, is recognizing that there are areas of the village or the study area that we want to preserve. So getting into what we're calling catalyst sites, or the focus sites, we chose 5 sites, both on the Gorham and the Windham side, that we think are good test scenarios for illustrating different types of housing and different types of streetscape interventions, park and open space interventions and concepts. So we'll go through each of these, try to go fairly quickly here, but going into number 1. So starting right away with the village center, we're looking at, in particular, the Little Falls side. So you can see where the number 1 is here, south of Presumpscot River. So the area that we're looking at is roughly 500 foot corridor between Houston Road and former Sawyer's Market, that I think most everyone here at the meeting probably is familiar with. It's a high visibility thoroughfare. There's good adjacency to the river, and there's opportunity for future potential transit or bus routes. So here's a snapshot Google Street View of that corridor, looking the south with former Sawyer's Market off to the left, some additional housing and existing commercial development to the right there. So this is a high-speed traffic corridor, 202. There are limited connections to the river currently. Main Street sort of turns its back to the river in some way, and it's a very auto-dominant corridor. So here's a big change. And again, back to Amanda's point, this isn't a development proposal by any means. This is the series of illustrations is just intended to illustrate the opportunities, and really these parcels, these sites would be developed more than likely on an individual kind of lot by lot basis, but also to kind of take focus away from the buildings a little bit. Really the interventions here that maybe we could see occur more in the near term are some of the streetscape interventions. So enhancing the sidewalk condition, enhanced pedestrian crosswalks, curb extensions to make the crossings shorter, and really providing that streetscape that creates a visual cue or some what we call a visual friction for motorists to slow down, stop, maybe park, get out of their vehicle, and maybe patronize one of these shops or restaurants or markets. And for any of the new or existing housing community that's surrounding this area, making this a pleasant, walkable space to maybe you don't even need to get in your vehicle to visit there because there's great, comfortable and safe sidewalks and bike ped infrastructure in place that you can use. So here's another view looking from Houston Road back towards the bridge, back towards the river with Sawyer's now on the right. Same concept, just different view, and what that might look like under a scenario where, again, providing more streetscape, signage, and wayfinding opportunities, maybe thinking about how the area is named and the way that it identifies itself. And then also incorporating some public spaces, parks. You can see a potential parklet over there, labeled number 4 on the left. Going up a bit with the buildings and incorporating some mixed uses. So it could be some ground floor shops and restaurants with above that some housing, some apartments, keeping those spaces activated and businesses viable. And then on to the second site. This is the Depot Street site. This is a series of parcels on the Windham side across from the current Ketty Mill site. So we're going to look at a roughly 3.5 acre site. Good proximity to other sites in the Windham Village Center. And here's an idea for how to incorporate 3 different housing typologies. So just exemplifying the fact that on a 3 acre site, you can fit 3 compatible housing typologies and uses on a fairly small site, on a 3 acre site. And doing that, we're suggesting reducing off-street parking, maybe not incorporating 2 vehicles per unit for every home on this site or other sites, because it takes up a lot of land. And instead incorporating some community green space, nice streetscape treatment along Depot Street here to the south. That street could be retrofitted with streetscape improvements and curb extensions and crosswalks to include some on-street parking, so we can actually do a lot of the duty of parking some of these homes actually on the street, where they actually create that visual friction for motorists and make the street safer and more comfortable for pedestrians too. The third site is a 2.25 acre site. This is the Andrews School site. So currently vacant site. It's within an existing predominantly single family neighborhood on the Windham side, along High Street. And again, some of the challenges are site topography. There's limited pedestrian facilities. It's primarily a lower mid-density residential context. So trying to think about how can we fit the type of housing density that we might need to help activate and create and enable some of these things that we want to happen along Main Street and in the village center, this activity, while doing so in a context that, or respecting the context in the neighborhood, a relatively lower density, medium density context. So that's what this could look like. So again, not a development proposal, but just an idea, in some ways a proof of concept that here on a 2 acre site, we can fit 3 housing typologies. They can be compatible, it can be attractive, it can be pedestrian oriented, and incorporate some nice streetscape elements, some community garden, park spaces, and address three different housing typologies, and allow for some car parking as well. So here we're showing apartment units as well as duplex, or what we call single family attached duplex units, and then very compact single family, and even some storage space. So here's a 3D view of that site. You can see up here to the upper right, the school building is still shown on the site. And then there's a sketch showing what that plan would look like from bird's eye perspective. So some denser development, denser housing kind of up front, front loading toward the street side, create a nice attractive edge, parking in back. There's a community common space in the center, some compact single family that really isn't too much smaller, much more compact than the single family homes that you can see down there to the lower left. And there's another view just zooming in a little bit so you can see, and we can come back to some of these slides and discuss. But really the idea here is it's not a development proposal, it's a different way of thinking and thinking about how we can activate some of these neighborhoods and create some of that needed density to help enable the main street that we want to see. So then a little bit different direction here, looking at the Mountain Division Trail crossing, thinking a little bit more about open space and trail amenities and how we can use this trail crossing as a bit of a gateway to the South Windham Village. So here's the existing site. Most here would know this site as the Blue Seal site with the rail corridor you can see there in red. And it's important to note that the Mountain Division Trail is very well utilized, and its existing paved condition is shown by the solid red line there diagonally to the lower left. In the future, hopefully, I think there's a planning effort or an engineering effort, I think, at this stage underway to complete the trail where it's currently shown dashed line up toward the top of the page behind Blue Seal. So starting to think about how can this junction or crossing be a gateway or threshold to the village and start to maybe both create a safe trail crossing and a trailhead and be an amenity for locals here, but also start to set the tone for the character of Main Street as you move toward the village center, maybe incorporating some of these traffic calming measures and thinking about on-street parking, utilizing the infrastructure that's in place versus large curb cut openings and lots of vehicle maneuvering and parking a lot of vehicles off-site. So here's the after view. So again, not a proposal necessarily, but a concept for how this intersection could be treated. So there's kind of a lot going on here, but the idea is that there's an enhanced crossing. It could be a different paving type, maybe concrete pavers or a colored concrete, something to kind of denote that trail crosses the road. There could be a bit of a speed table where the road raises up 6 inches or so to slow vehicles down. And we thought about this idea of maybe there are a series of low walls that create a bit of a barrier for anyone who's maybe on a bicycle riding along the trail, and you kind of encounter this wall. It acts as a baffle and slow people down before they cross the road, and they don't just race right across, potentially cause an accident. And then this idea of maybe thinking about reconfiguring the adjacent site and incorporating and blending some of the parking that could be for the trailhead and for trail users with the commercial user there, Blue Seal currently in the upper right, and how the two could synergize in a way. And then lastly, we're taking a look at the Ketty Mill site. This is a very complex study that's ongoing with the EPA currently. It is a Superfund site, meaning that there are federal dollars available to clean up the site, mediate some of the contamination, and return the site to a condition that it could be developed as either a park or commercial mixed use kind of village type development, or a combination of both. It's a roughly 6-acre site. You can see it here in the center. It's colored purple. It also extends down to the south between the railroad corridor and the river. It does have direct river adjacency, as I'm sure everyone knows here. And it's very central to the village core. So it's really important, what I would call a catalyst site for the area to kind of get this right. So kind of zooming out here, we're going to show that the Ketty Mill site is up to the right. And again, not a development proposal, but trying to provide an illustration for how some of all these different recommendations could start to flow together. So how the Ketty Mill site could be redeveloped with maybe it's 50% mixed use development with some housing and some ground floor coffee shop, restaurant, retail spaces, maker spaces, but also providing some river park space, some recreational space, and how that kind of blends and starts to possibly set the tone for how the rest of the village could start to infill, be redeveloped partially. Public spaces and streetscape improvements could be incorporated. So we'll click over to the proposed, and you can see quite a difference. And just providing that illustration again of you can see the old fire station there in the foreground. Maybe in the future there could be river access. There could be some signage or some wayfinding, identifying markers for the village along 202. You can see the very predominant clear pedestrian byways, sidewalks connecting clearly through the village along the river. One thing that we noticed that was really interesting about the Ketty Mill site is you can strike a line and create a really clear direct connection between the village center, the river and the bridge, this park, and then up to the upper right, the Mountain Division Trail. So linking that Mountain Division Trail corridor to the village on this linear kind of boardwalk. And that could be wide. We were imagining maybe 12 to 15 feet wide. And maybe that's a great place in the future to host one of these food truck events or kind of a pop-up community event or music venue. Could be a great place to incorporate playground, play features. And again, this idea of maker spaces and mixed use development and housing, and kind of that site starting to set the tone for some infill development through the village. So I think that's about what we have for a planning and design presentation. We want to open it up and leave a lot of time for Q&A and feedback for the rest of the meeting. We can go back, as I said, and look at previous slides or illustrations and ask questions. And then we can talk about, we'll have an exit survey and we can talk about next steps beyond that. But I think at this point, we want to open it up to Q&A. I think I'll hand it back to Carol or Amanda. You want to MC?
There are a couple questions in the chat that we could start with as well,
Okay.
but I don't know if there's any hands up in the room, Carol and Amanda. We can't hear you all, by the way, Carol.
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
The concepts sound wonderful. What are you going to do with all the tractor trailers and the heavy traffic that goes down 202 all the time? Isn't that going to be problematic?
I can take a shot at that, or Amanda, if anyone wants to jump in. The idea would be, if some of these streetscape improvements were completed as we have illustrated, we would not change the travel lane width. So the travel way would remain the same. It's really what we're suggesting are the shoulders and the sides of the road, really altering in a way that to reduce pavement and sort of formalize what today is already there as paving, could be on-street parking and take more of a village feel. So the travel way will remain unobstructed.
And I'll just follow that up by saying, I think that these concepts we put forward would not reduce the number of trucks on 202, but it would certainly reduce the speed of the trucks on 202. I know that several years ago when River Road was being reconstructed. The town thought that would be a great opportunity to shift that designated over limit truck route from 202, which is Main Street through the study area, over to that newly reconstructed River Road. But there were some connectivity issues as you continued south for those trucks. So there wasn't at that time an opportunity to think about how do you divert some of those truck trips to alternate routes. So we've been progressing with the assumption that those trucks are still going to be there, but how do we think about road design and the built environment as a way to make sure that trucks are going to be, and all vehicles are going to be traveling at a slower speed where people feel safe to walk around.
Yeah, and maybe just to follow up on the follow-up. One thing we heard over and over as Ben was talking through the summer Thursday events in particular from people was, we didn't hear so much about the nuisance of trucks traveling through the corridor, but individual vehicles and the speeds of private vehicles in particular. So that's really the goal, is making the bike pedestrian environment more friendly, comfortable, and safe, and trying to provide some natural ways to slow traffic down a bit without obstructing or creating maneuvering issues for trucking.
All right,
I
we do
think-
have another comment question.
Okay,
my
we have some in the
question is
chat
this.
too.
How do you increase the population? You talked about future development, yet maintain the natural. How is that? Explain that to me, how that works. When you say increase future development, how does that, how is that going to work?
Our other question is a good piggyback to this, which is why do we need to increase housing density in the villages? They kind of go hand in hand. Ben, if you want to take a step.
I think for me, I'll let Ben jump in, or Logan, or anyone else. But for me, what we heard over and over, and I don't think I emphasized this well enough in my portion of the presentation, is that almost unanimously, everyone kind of romanticizes. If you lived here for a long time, you've kind of romanticized this time in the village where Sawyer's and some of these other places were great meetup spots to meet your neighbors. The village was once a more vibrant place. People were walking around and patronizing a couple of shops that were here. So you either lived here and you remember that time, and you kind of want it to be that way again, and for some reason it's not that way, or you'd like to see generally you'd like to see a more vibrant, more active village center. So what we're proposing is that housing density or density within walkable proximity to the village center is important, because it's going to enable and activate those businesses. It will allow those types of things to happen along that main street. It's not really that we're proposing density or housing for the sake of proposing density or housing. We don't want this to be a master plan for the villages, South Windham, Little Falls, as the receiving site for all Southern Maine housing development. It's because we'd like this to be a quaint, vibrant, walkable village center, and we think it has the possibility to be that. But we think that the main missing ingredient is people, and people within a very close proximity to those things that we want to see happen.
And I will say too that when you look at those catalyst sites that we spent a little time on this evening, we can flip back to those. There were 5 catalyst sites presented, and they were all previously developed. None of these example sites we chose were greenfield projects. They're all things that had been developed, or places where there had been activity in the past. at a school, for example, here in this one. A lot of the major employers, the mill in particular, is something that will certainly be redeveloped in some way going forward. So this is one thing, kind of getting more at that, what seems like a dichotomy. We need new private investment. We need more places for people to live. How do you balance that with protecting green spaces, preserving the natural assets that are in the area? And I think a lot of it falls down to the fact that this is a built up active area with a long history. And the future of this place is, I think, more about redevelopment and new investment in existing structures than it is about going and clearing 5 acres on the edge to put up a new subdivision. And I think the other thing to say about that is there was an awful lot of feedback about the natural environment and all of the primarily the Mountain Division Trail, the Presumpscot River, Hawks Preserve, and all of the trails there. And there was a lot of, I think, desire expressed to connect these things. How do you do all these things that we've talked about while preserving that river corridor, the riparian edges, the woods along the river? How do you, add new green space to a network that people are going to find desirable? So I think that this plan, if I could characterize it, it's really a plan for change. And I think that people are seeing that and they're feeling that. But I think it's also building into the recommendations a lot of preservation and enhancing the things that people really do care about in this area. So hopefully we can dig a little more into that through some questions from the audience.
There's another one.
Folks in the chat?
Yeah, from the chat. Taking the spring survey, there seemed to be an underlying drumbeat to increase the population of the village and attract more business. I couldn't answer those parts of the survey for that reason. Shouldn't the core effort be to improve the quality of the place and quality of life for residents today?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Nick,
Yes.
you're on mute.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, I think we're trying to, I think admittedly, I think we've, with the design scenarios we've shown and some of the concepts, it's easy to look at this, like this sketch, for example, this before and after, and immediately your eye is drawn toward the buildings, right? I think everyone looks at the buildings right away. And I would say, don't think about the buildings. If we could look at the edges of the road, those are also part of this proposal and part of the master plan. And I'm a landscape architect. That's kind of my media, right? I care mainly about the public spaces, the trail connections, opportunities for parklets, and how to make the road a better place for people. So this concept illustrates that. I think the problem with the illustration is that your eye is drawn to the buildings, but really the streetscape enhancements, the incorporating public spaces into any future development, because a lot of the space that's shown here on the concept sketch is privately owned land. So if any of these parcels are developed in the future, we're saying in this master plan, well, that developer, while they're enhancing their property, they should incorporate public space, because that's the way it will get built. They'll have to build a building. And when they build the building to make revenue of some sort, to have a business tenant or 12 units, we want to say enhance the street too, create some public space. So there's always kind of a public-private partnership, whether it's said that way or not. There is. And that's how a lot of this that you see here would occur. Then there's also, on the same token, there's opportunities like in one of these earlier maps that I think we skimmed over very quickly, like this one, for example, with a lot of green. What we're trying to talk about here is the fact that there is a lot of undeveloped land in the study area. And a lot of our design scenarios have been focused just in this center village core, we're calling it, a very, very small area. And what, as Ben was suggesting earlier, what we're suggesting is that actually there are kind of levers. Maybe we push the density lever or the housing lever, or however you want to characterize it, up on the areas that are very walkable and adjacent to that village core where it makes sense, where you don't necessarily need a vehicle to do everything. And the areas where you're further from the village core, it kind of makes sense to preserve the rural character, preserve prime farmland, and also identify potential trail corridors and start to think about how maybe there's a group like the Presumpscot Regional Land Trust who can begin to acquire property and create this open space and parks framework that we don't have a lot of in Southern Maine. We don't have a lot of publicly owned large tracts of land. So it's kind of balancing both. We're kind of pushing this idea of, or I guess we're illustrating this idea of density and walkable housing and this walkable village core concept. But on the same token, we haven't talked about as much, but we should, the idea of preserving and conserving land where it doesn't make sense to do a lot of development. So I just want to make sure that we're having conversation on both sides here, recognizing that this is both a vision for open space, trails and recreation, and housing and a vibrant Main Street.
Can I just add something to that? In that I think there though were some underlying assumptions that were based on both towns' comprehensive plans and the 1998 master plan, that these are both growth areas. So that's where we want the population to be. And the 98 plan and our comp plans both talk about a need for and a desire from the public for more businesses here. And that's what we heard all summer and in the meetings, that the variety of businesses, there's a demand for that because we've lost that like over time. So I don't know that we're talking about an amount of growth that is, to be, this isn't going to be the population center for Windham or Gorham, but to revitalize it in a way that it once was. Like the population here hasn't been growing, and we're not at the same numbers that we used to be, and to grow in a way that is walkable, that won't generate traffic or cause adverse impacts on the river.
It's a very good point. And I'll just quickly add that, in the past, and sometimes not the too distant past, people will remember that there were places to eat in this area. There was a dry cleaner and a barber shop, and those services and businesses aren't there now. And when we think about some of the changes in the study area that have impacted that, it's primarily, in part at least, due to the fact that this used to be a major employment center, and there were always people around, there was always activity, people to patronize those businesses. And both communities, I think, have taken positive steps toward relaxing the zoning, allowing more things to happen over the years, but it hasn't led to a lot of changes in new businesses on the ground. And we really spent a lot of time asking ourselves, why could, that be? We allow banks in this area. Why are there no banks? We allow hardware stores. We've got Blue Seal, but why aren't there more lawyers and accountants and those kinds of things? So it's primarily, as Nick said earlier, the missing ingredient is the people. That is one of the major things that's changed over time. So in part, some of the recommendations have to do with providing more housing options, so people can be in the area and support those businesses very directly. But there's also a lot of improvements to the streetscape that we're recommending, trail connections, and certainly people who live in those areas in the study area today. And I hope you would find some benefit in being able to, have a new place to eat or a place to take your dry cleaning handy to where you live.
The fire station?
Ben, Dave. Reduce parking. You're asking people to come into the area. And you're asking people to develop the area. Put businesses in. You need people to support businesses. So you need to bring growth in. But the people that you'd be bringing in, I look at everybody in this room, they're gray hair. The people you'd be bringing in are younger people. Younger people would come with kids. But when you look at younger people, all of them work. All of them have 2 cars. You can't reduce parking unless you develop standards where they have to park in their building. And that's not part of any of the development I ever see. I go to New Mexico, excuse me, I see these buildings in their homes, but the parking is in the home.
Like underneath.
With underneath, right, 100%. And that's the type of development you tell them they have to have. Down the street, we've got elderly, Amanda, what's it called? What type of housing?
Affordable senior housing.
Affordable senior, no, down the duplexes that, no, way down in Windham. The overlay zone, what's the overlay zone called?
The retirement.
Yeah, you got the retirement. You go look at them, they all got garages. And there's a whole bunch of them got a second car parked there. And that's older people that aren't giving up their second vehicle. You can't say to reduce the parking. You've got to accommodate for the parking other ways.
I've got a fun exercise just to think about, a little thought experiment. So one of the principles, one of the things that we're recognizing in the study area is that there's a lot of road, a lot of public road, right? It's a very large study area as well. So Route 202 on the screen now runs north to south. That's about a mile-long road, okay? And I'm just doing some really dumb back of napkin math to illustrate a point. So a mile is 5,280 feet, right? It takes 22 linear feet to parallel park one vehicle, okay? That's 480 cars that you can park along that road, in theory. You have to take away 10%, okay? So that's over 400 cars you can park along that road on one side. Now you can park on 2 sides. That's almost 800 vehicles you can park along one road. And there are several roads in the study area. So my point is, maybe there shouldn't be on-street parking, or maybe there can't be on-street parking along the entire 202 corridor in the study area. Probably could be. There probably is today, actually. It's a paved shoulder. My point is that there's lots of public infrastructure already in place that we kind of think of it as a little bit of a waste of land. We'd rather build more homes on the land that's suitable to build homes than to store vehicles, if we can. And if we can let the roads do double duty and accommodate some of the parking, then great. So that's the only point. It's a fun thought experiment. We can park a lot of vehicles on street.
Nick, I have an observation. Can you
Yes.
put up or would one of you put up the buildings with the streetscape you were using a few moments ago? Because
This
we
one?
haven't,
Right there.
we've talked a lot about housing density and whatnot and the need for that, but one of the early on comments that was included in one of the first slides is the wish for an art museum or art gallery and a library. So what I'm throwing out there is, imagine one of those buildings, the bottom floor is the library with a second floor as art gallery space. You know, that this is mixed use, right? So it's not all about housing and, you know, the coffee shop. It could be about the art gallery and the library
Right.
or bookstore for that matter.
And leave that slide up for 1 second. I grew up in the city, Charlestown, Mass. I know parking. Look at that slide. You got crosswalks, you got bump outs, you got streets. You got some driveways. Your 10% on your parking scheme is way out of scale. You've got to be looking at somewhere around 30% lost. And then when people have to park 100 feet, 300 feet from their house and walk back, believe me, that's just that one street. The
Yep.
side streets, we just put housing in right down the street when we ripped right up the street. When we ripped the building down and on the corner, they put what, six units in, 8 units in. We sold the property.
It's 4 units. It used to be 6.
We put 4 units in. You drive by there and their parking spaces are all filled. My point is, I'm not saying you don't park on the street. I agree with you parking on the street. What I'm telling you is the other buildings you're building outside off the street, if you want to save space, you gotta have them parked differently.
I think your point is well taken, Dave. On-street parking is going to be part of it. The on-street, on-site, I should say, parking needs to get looked at. And I think our recommendations are also going to include looking for some kind of municipal parking facility, like a parking lot, because a key part of the village idea is that you can park your car and walk around. Like maybe if you have a car parked on the street and you live in one of these buildings, you can go do your daily needs and then go back to your house and work from home and then go out to dinner and maybe not even use your car all day. So I think that the other thing I'll say is, Nick, if you could flip to the existing condition, the slide right before this. I would love to, 10 years from now, have the, see a situation where, there's just not enough parking. Like, I don't think parking is the issue in South Windham, Little Falls. I think it's the uses, the activity that are going to generate energy and gravity so that you're creating the kind of place people want to live, the kind of place people want to work and spend time and be able to do those things. And I think the last thing about this that kind of goes along with some of those parking recommendations is we're envisioning a village that will be able to be served by bus service. There will be enough people in the core and along Main Street that would make it a little more realistic for some families to reduce a car.
Yep, I would just like to add that as well as, bus service in the future, as we increase miles of bike lanes, more and more trips can be by bike and by bus and other modes of travel than a personal vehicle.
And it'll take time. This is not something that's going to happen in the next, overnight kind of scenario.
And Will had his hand up very patiently, so I would like to hand over the mic to him if we can. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Logan. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah, I want to go back to, the changes that have taken place in the village over the years, the memory of the barber shop, and that time period. And point out that that was while there was still active rail service to the village. There was in-village employment for much of that time. And the loss of that mill helped change the character of the village. But we're at a time now where we're in a very different place. Where why haven't any banks wanted to locate in South Windham Village? I would speculate that we have 3 excellent service centers within a 10 to 15 minute drive. Gorham Village is the closest, and Westbrook and North Windham after that. And so we're right in the middle of a triangle of service centers that provide those basic needs. When you ask people in a survey, would you like to have an art gallery here? Would it be fun to have a place to eat in the village? Everybody's going to say yes. If you ask the question, would you be willing to increase the population of the village by 20% in order to enable an art gallery to settle here? You might get a different answer. And so the village has changed from being its own mini service center at a time decades ago when service centers were less centralized and there were more services broadly spread throughout the state. Variety stores thrived. Variety stores have died over the last 50 years, and I'm glad for everyone that's still here because I still love them. But I just recognize some of those things, if you would. Thank you.
Ben, Nick, do you
Thanks,
want to
Will.
speak to the service center idea?
Yeah, I think that's a very thoughtful comment, Will. Appreciate that. We recognize that our planning work is taking place within South Windham and Little Falls, place within the region. We're not trying to create a new mini Portland or a South Portland or a new Gorham Village or North Windham. I think that a lot of the work, and we've begun to detail this, and this will be in some of the plan documentation, is that, you know, every community has activity centers, and we've listed a few in Gorham, and we've listed a few in Windham, and places change. And I think that your summary of how this area has changed is a good one. The idea that you know, this has become essentially a convenience center, a place that relies on pass-through traffic for its economic activity, a place that it is characterized by a high-speed U.S. numbered highway as its main street, and really has, I think, lost a lot of its housing diversity. And the input we've heard, in addition to preserving the river, enhancing the trail connections, has talked about getting a little bit of that back, a little bit of, you know, we want to have some more options. And I think that your point, Will, about, you know, how much more would it take to get the arts center, or like, how many more people would it take to have a Rosemont market? And is it worth it? You know, those are the kinds of things that we've been weighing as a planning team. And, you know, that's helped shape our recommendations. So it's not just pie in the sky planning, but trying to like keep these recommendations grounded in the context of this place in the region.
Carol, you're on mute. Okay, good. There's a question here.
More questions here?
Hi, thank you. I get several questions for you. One would be, this is the first time that I've seen that it appears that you've proposed any type of zoning lines. And, you know, again, I haven't had a chance to look at it, but prior, what it appears that I've been seeing that you're looking at is sort of zoning corridors that are offset a certain distance from the street, which in most cases are cutting properties, either partial, you're not following the boundary lines of those properties. I hope that you haven't got to the point, or I guess I'm asking, are you accepting input on where those zoning boundaries are going to be proposed? My partnership owns a piece of property that we want to redevelop, and we bought it in hopes of redeveloping. But it's all zoned as a urban commercial zone. And the plan that I saw you show takes about 1/4 of it in one zone and then 3/4 of it in another zone. So again, I hope you're going to accept some input or take a closer look at how you're drawing those boundary lines so that entire properties can be redeveloped and invested in. And the other question I guess I would have is, have you developed any type of space and bulk regulations at this point that you're going to propose, or is that still further down the road? Last comment, I love the streetscapes. Are both communities looking at getting either state or federal funding in creating those streetscapes versus having private developers piecemeal them? Because if they're piecemealed, that it will never happen because, if you've got 100-foot long lot and a developer comes in and wants to build one of these buildings, it's only going to go so far. And over time, it's going to be pretty difficult to get any kind of streetscape that looks like this. So I'm not sure if part of your proposals are that the community is looking at getting funding in order to promote this idea, which hopefully then would spark private redevelopment. So I know it's a bunch, but.
Yep. Thanks for that. And Nick, I think the person was talking about that walkability map that had some of those. It looks like a zoning map, but it's really, I think this is the one where we're, really focusing on where activity was meant to be focused. And they're not meant to be like zone lines or anything. I appreciate your comment about splitting lots with zone lines. But I think the way, and I hope the way that this plan is used going forward is to help the towns of Windham and Gorham coordinate their zoning so that we can be thinking about this place as a cohesive unit. And I think that there was a comment earlier that said, hey, this is one place. We've always thought about it this way. But sometimes in a town office, your vision stops at the boundary or stops at the river. And I think that this is a very good proactive effort on behalf of both communities to kind of break out of that a little bit and take a look at this place with some fresh eyes. So our hope is, as we think about, you can see more walkable to, more less walkable, I should say, and where the parks are going to be, that this becomes the roadmap. So you can kind of see how the focus really is on a core village area, as Nick had mentioned earlier. And it will inform zoning. This is not zoning.
Would you go to the slide where the second bullet point mentions zoning?
Next one.
That one.
That one. You asked the question, is that showing zoning?
I think
Sorry,
I can
so-
answer the question. It's not
Okay.
the exact boundary lines.
Yeah.
That'll be up to the towns to fine tune along the way. Some of the planners use sort of a misty version of this where you don't actually see a boundary defined. It's sort of in this general area, this is where you want to have this zoning. So I think that's what this is depicting. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. Yeah, this is it's a conceptual master plan. So the idea is to convey the concept that more density should occur along the corridors, along the road corridors for various reasons, in closer proximity to the village core, and graduate out. So I think, as Carol was saying, if we could re-illustrate this, we would maybe make the edges sort of diffuse and fuzzy. And there will be another step in the process to actually draw and define the exact zone boundaries. So those are all really good questions. I don't have definitive answers to those myself. But I think I can say definitively that we're certainly still taking input, and we're not at a point where we're defining specific zone districts right now.
And there will be an opportunity, speaking of additional input, at the project website to complete kind of what we're calling an exit survey, just a place to provide some feedback on the early recommendations that you're seeing here, and some open-ended space as well to let us know your thoughts. So that might be a good way to get those to the planning team.
We do have a comment here or question. Are there any more for the Zoom folks?
We can go ahead and ask the question in the room. We can.
Okay.
Yep.
You're up, sir.
Can't think of a question to ask at the moment.
Sorry, he had his hand
Okay.
up earlier.
No problem.
Maybe we answered it.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's a couple other questions lingering that we can get to. Has there been an internal village traffic survey done once all the extra housing is added to both towns? I think no. Is the answer to
No,
that one.
and just to provide some context on that, this would never happen all at once. It's going to be half an acre at a time, if it does occur, and it's up to individual property owners. Like I think it was Will that spoke earlier, to develop their properties. There's no big development master plan that's going to come down and drop next week. So just keeping that in mind.
Thanks, Nick. Another question was, one of our repeated requests since living here for many years is that we need a public playground. Do we have plans for that? And I think you can go to your Ketty Mill sketch. So it is a strategy that we've recommended, and we have illustrated it in a few in this concept.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, so there's not a lot of municipally or state-owned land where you could create outside of the Ketty Mill and maybe some of the mill sites and the areas within shoreland zone along the river that limit development, both open space park development and housing type development. There isn't a lot of land that's available to create large parks with playgrounds necessarily. The Ketty Mill site is one that could be. But then also just kind of flipping back, kind of the idea is that, this is a 2.25 acre site. This is the overarching concept here is that you could have housing, and this site could build a small park that could include a playground. So it's what we call privately owned public space in the future, where maybe this little courtyard in the center of the site has a playground.
Still muted. Can you hear me yet?
Yep.
Is the existing school in Gorham outside of the 5-minute, 10-minute walk shed?
This site.
I think as the crow flies,
No.
it is within
There's
the
another
walk
school
shed. Oh,
in Gorham,
Or Great Falls Elementary School?
not Great Falls.
Oh,
The Roby?
Right now, it's a community building.
Friends School.
Oh. Yeah, I know what they're talking about.
Is that the activity center?
It's the senior center.
Oh, yeah, no, it's
Yeah,
I don't know what they're talking about.
it's the Little Falls Activity Center.
right.
That is not a school, it's a daycare center where they.
Right,
So
but-
my
but the
point
recre-
is,
Falls Recreation area, there are some places in Gorham that
That-
are public.
and there could be a site there for playground equipment.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, we have two different school sites. There could be playground equipment within both of them.
Yep.
You wanted to ask about the landscaping on the street?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I guess it really is probably not up to you guys, but are the communities looking at, again, trying to get some sort of funding in order to start that streetscape project in order to promote, redevelopment, instead of having it done individually by developers like that?
I know that there is the Maine DOT has a program called the Village Partnership Initiative. And they make funding available for projects similar to this. So this plan would be a tool that would allow the towns to pursue further funding. I can't speak to whether there's.
That's one way for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I think we've been doing that certainly with CDBG applications that funded this plan. We haven't, and I don't know if the implementation recommendations would say you shall, require developers to build them. I think the objective here is that the town has been, I think I saw a question in the chat about why hasn't the 98 plan been implemented, but I think the towns have been doing things to improve the public sphere in line with that plan, and I think would continue to do so with this plan to the extent that it's possible. But I certainly would hope that if there's an opportunity for public-private partnerships, we would entertain that as well.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment to recognize that there are some things that you can do a little bit at a time, and that there are going to be some things that you're going to want to do in a bigger chunk or all at once. So that's definitely a fair comment. And I think getting to one of these questions that you just posed, Amanda, that someone online had asked as well. The town has, I think both towns have made some good progress on implementation items from the plan. But I think what we've learned, one of the things we've learned from that effort is that it can't be 100% up to the municipalities to implement all of these items. I think that you're going to see in this upcoming plan more recommendations for partnerships with nonprofits and community groups to help make some of these other things happen, so that it's grassroots efforts as well as more official town office kind of efforts.
Ben, two questions. One is, we've already paid for sidewalks that are going in, I believe, next year on
Main Street,
Depot.
Main Street.
Main Street.
Main Street. Has that plan been looked at with your plan? I don't want to build a sidewalk
Yeah,
and not have it, streetscaped or anything else like that, that has to get taken out. And the other thing is, right now, GP Cog's got over like $150 million for safe streets. And if this plan shook its legs, we could probably get in line for some of that.
Good feedback.
We're running short on time. Will has his hand up, so I'll let you ask the last question. Any questions that we didn't get to, we will publish in on the website. So thanks, everyone, and go ahead, Will, ask your question.
Thank you, Logan. I have my hand up for one reason, and then David spoken. I agree with his concern about executing the Sideways project next spring if further streetscaping is in the offing and the risk there. I still am uncomfortable with the need for a sidewalk from the Presumpscot River to the railroad tracks on the west side of the road, when we already have that sidewalk on the east side of the road. So the navigability is there for pedestrians. And if you look at the slide with the topo lines where Main Street crosses Black Brook, you'll just see how steep the angle of repose is there. And the engineering, bottom right part of that slide, look at those topo lines. It drops more than 20 feet from the road to Black Brook and basically vertical. And you're going to put a sidewalk in there. I still think that's a problem. What I raised my hand about was to come back to the Ketty Mill site. In the spring survey, I suggested that as a wonderful location, all of it or most of it for the town park. It's at the village center. It's on the Presumpscot River, river access. It's on the Sebago to the Sea Trail, trail access. It's accessible from Main Street. And I love the idea of having a boardwalk along the river that would go from Main Street through the park to the trail. I think you should reconsider what the highest and best use of that Ketty property is. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
It's like this. Yeah.
So Amanda or Carol, do you have any final words before we release people to the villagesmasterplan.com for the exit survey?
I just wanted to say thank you for everyone who came to the fire station in Windham tonight, and thank you for the folks that joined us in Zoom land. And there's the website, if everyone would go to that to keep track of where we're at in this project. We have updates on that as we progress through the next couple of months. We'll have the timing on it. What do I want to say? You know, the agenda, so to speak. So follow us along until we get to the town council review of the written document. This is where you can add on your comments. Anything more, Ben or Nick or Amanda?
No, thank you.
No, thank you very much. And just to maybe add on to that thought, we will be aiming to have a draft plan in the hands of the towns for public review early next year, and final plans shortly thereafter.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
stay
that's it.
involved.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye. Get away.